budget work session. This is a committee of the whole under the Budget and Finance Committee, and I am currently active chair of that. But the presentation will primarily be from the administration today as we start to review their proposed amendments for this. Just a couple timelines and dates, which I'll probably review a couple times throughout the course of the meeting, is that we have a session, a brief meeting for the Assembly next week, Tuesday. However, we weren't able to appropriately notify the public of a potential opportunity to review that. We will not be taking up the amendments at a formal meeting of the Assembly next Tuesday. That will take place on the 26th. The interest is that we would facilitate the decision-making on that night of the 26th of March so that we can act on that and then appropriately process the tax assessments and the bills to go out with that shortly after that. If we can't resolve on the 26th, we'll probably likely call for a special meeting after the 26th of this month and resolve it prior to the drop dead for the tax bill mailings. So all of that said, the Assembly members today should have gotten electronically the form that we can use for facilitating the amendments that you may have as it relates to not only what the administration has to critique here, but I'm not sure of the firm time, to be fair to everybody, on how to spend some time reviewing that and get that back. But if the committee and the clerk could see some of that, I'm thinking by next Wednesday or Thursday, we'd be in good shape to decide whether or not we need another work session. Trying to stay away from work session next Friday. It's Good Friday into the Easter weekend. And so that's it. Right now, we have no other work sessions on the plate, but have flexibility, of course, call them if you think we need to collectively come together to discuss anything. So as we have that, any questions from the Assembly members first, I guess, would be appropriate, and then we'll just launch into the administration press.
Process. I have some, I don't know if it's going to be an amendment or not, but I need clarification on an issue.
Sure.
Do you want, how should that be funneled? Do you want the committee to just know the issue, or?
Well, entirely your choice, I guess. I wouldn't want the committee role to get into a judgment perspective whether it's a good amendment or not. So I think right now, if you can work it out, the obvious things are funding sources and accounts and things like that. So
Sure.
the administration is probably your best resource for that. And again, I don't think the gathering of the amendments is anything more than procedural, as we did at the final in December. It's not an intention, I don't think, for the committee to weigh in or negate anything for that perspective. It's just a collecting role for those to facilitate that into packaging and make sure the administration gets it timely so they can respond as well. So does that answer your question?
Thanks.
Administration. Hi, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cheryl and I will present today with her doing most of the presenting and me serving as the backup relief guy. So we're approaching the first quarter budget amendments really with kind of a four-pronged approach, if you will. We want to fund some of the things that we promised last fall when we were crafting the 2011 budget regarding public safety, primarily the police and fire academies and the addition of a domestic violence prosecutor. We do have increased costs in various departments that we feel obligated to fund, including higher fuel prices and other areas, workers' comp. You'll see those in the list of things. We want to take care of some of the liabilities that still remain on our books that we've talked about probably ad nauseum with yourself and the public, including paying off the ML&P loan, as well as at least two of the environmental liabilities that we have to take care of this summer. And then finally, we want to provide some tax relief to our constituents. And the good thing is that we're able to accomplish a lot of this because of frugal management of the 2010 budget does allow us to have about $11.2 million that can be applied to some of these areas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Cheryl, and she can kind of walk through the presentation.
Okay. So you have obviously the PowerPoint presentation. Just to give you some context, when we started out the process in about February, we asked the department to please try to limit any requests to costs that weren't anticipated last fall or estimates that we didn't know at that time, as well as the mayor said, some of the priority areas that he committed to. And then also, it was a time in which we fine-tune and update the revenues, because, more time has passed since last October, November, and so it gives us, Treasury primarily, an opportunity to be more precise to the degree that's possible. In terms of the expenditures, this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's most of the expenditures in the next couple of slides. But in terms of the first priority area of public safety, we have amendment requests for the fire department. We talked previously about the SAFER grant at the time you approved the approved budget. We didn't know the status of the federal funds. We have about 1.6 million in federal funds for those positions that will start in May. And then there's about 200,000 in local funds that will pay for turnouts and radios for those recruits or those new hires. Then Medic 7 Sand Lake Ambulance that voters approved. This is 300, pardon?
Yes.
Oh.
Speak to Safer.
349,000 for staffing that starting in September. They won't have the new ambulance yet, but they'll use a reserve ambulance, so that will get underway in July. And then 17,000, I specifically put this in to highlight appropriation to Chugiak Fire Service Area for EMS training.
Is that just to take care of those guys out there?
It was the request from the board.
And should be appropriately considered. Mr. Trainee has a question as it relates to fire.
Safer grant, is that one that disappears 25% every year and then we can't get rid of the people when it's gone with, or what's the conditions under the grant?
It doesn't do like the COPS grant did, or, for the SROs where it
Right.
phases out. It's full funding for 2 years, and I believe we have to maintain full staffing for 3 years.
Can you find out for me on that?
No, it's just that.
But do we have to give them, the feds, back any money if for some reason we let the people go after that period of time, like the
That would
cops?
violate the grant agreement, so it's not our intention to let people go.
I know, but let's just take a look at what could possibly happen. If you'd let me know, I'd appreciate it. Because I remember, like you do, Mayor, the COPS grant, and it was reduced 25% every year, and then at the end, if you got rid of them for whatever reason, you had to pay the money back to the feds. I just want to know if there's conditions on federal dollars.
Harriet, go ahead.
On the SAFER grant, wasn't that one we appropriated the other night, well over $5 million? So is that, how many years is that going to?
It provides funding for 2 years, and so because we're starting in May, so it's 2 years worth of funding.
Okay, so
Yes,
this is
it's
a
5
partial,
million.
this is a
Correct.
partial
This
for
is
this
just
year.
Yes,
And then
it's
the
the
full amount
2011
next year.
amount.
Okay.
Right, and then it'll be rolled into our 2012 budget.
Thank you.
Mayor, I just want to know if there's additional obligations, because sometimes with federal things, they look like nice presents. There's something else under the tree.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Under the police department, we've included $882,000 for the police academy, as well as for training costs associated with the academy. That is in addition to the $380,000 that the assembly previously approved using the federal forfeiture funds.
And rather than hang off till the end, I think that as we have departmental corrections presented, that would be something I'd like to talk about. So Mr. Horniman has a question.
And does this 882,000 just include equipment, salaries for, and what time date do we anticipate an academy for the police department?
October 10th is the start date.
And we had an announcement yet for posting for applications?
That's the police department.
Any luck, we will start accepting applications this afternoon. We were hoping to open up the computer to NeoGov to accept applications today.
For the chief or for the administration?
Chief.
Chief.
Okay, that's it for now.
Mr. Trainee has a question for you, Chief.
Chief, you said you're going to start hiring when?
We're shooting for October 10th as a startup date.
Okay, Eldorf has a job fair on the 29th of April. You might want to give them a call and ask them about it. They'll be over at the National Guard Armory. They've invited 100 employers, and it'll be both Army and Air Force, a job fair. 552-4943, his name is Mike. Set you up with a table there at no cost.
What was the number again, sir?
552-4943, his name is Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, and then in the municipal attorney's office, we're requesting $84,000 for a new prosecutor for domestic violence cases. The good news is that we got a grant from the state to fund the police department, Health and Human Services, and Awake in domestic violence areas. But the prosecutor's office, what they got was 3 clerks. And so this will allow us in that continuum of support to prosecute more cases.
Question.
Ms. Drummond has a question about that position.
Thank you. Is that a part year? Is that a partial year, the
Correct.
84,000? And is that
Yes.
including benefits?
Yes,
Well-
the full year cost would be about $125,000.
Okay, so the comments I've seen that you'll never get a prosecutor for $84,000, it's because it's partial year?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
To the position, Mr. Honeman?
Yes, what fund source would that come from? Whose budget?
Whose budget?
Right, does that come from, does a municipal prosecutor have its own standalone budget, or is it absorbed from?
Well, no, they're
The
part of the
grant?
Department of Law, and so it's additional new funds that we're requesting, local funds, to pay for the cost of the prosecutor.
Okay, it wouldn't come from like a federal grant, a state grant, or the police budget per se?
No, not this request. The other areas that I described is from a grant that's through the state, Edward Burns funds. And that's funding those other aspects, but we didn't get any funding for the prosecutor. Okay, in Health and Human Services, under the, costs not anticipated, at the time we did our approved budget, the animal control contract was up for bid, and it has a $54,000 increase. And then the CSP emergency shelter contract also went out to bid, and it has a $113,000 increase. And so that's why those requests are here. And then under maintenance and operations, $250,000 for what we call the Porcupine Building. Not because it looks like an animal, anyway, but it's on Porcupine
It's on
Street?
Porcupine
Okay.
Street, that's right.
And it's to retrofit it for storage for the homeless campus property.
I don't want to comment about that building necessarily, but Mr. Trainee would like to talk to you about the CSP.
Cheryl, the CSP,
Funding.
with this contract, can you give me a map that just shows me what areas of Anchorage is covered by CSP? Because I know at one time they would only go so far down, wouldn't go past Tudor. And I've got some constituents that want to know exactly how far we cover the CSP. Thank you.
Mr. Honeman on the building.
I think the Associated had.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not familiar with this particular facility, but won't you need a staff person to deal with it too?
Yeah, that's why we've been working with nonprofit agencies to actually serve as the folks that will do the storage, cataloging, and redistribution back when people claim their items. You may recall that several months ago, when we first were trying to figure out what is the proper date, we were obviously in court trying to figure out what our parameters were. I had mentioned that if we do have to get into the storage business, it might be an opportunity for a nonprofit to participate, and one has stepped up. Can't quite announce yet because we're still working on terms, but.
Okay, so that's why you're retrofitting the building, but you're not funding the position.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Along that same question, would this meet, maybe it's a question for Dennis's office, but would this meet requirements under code for safekeeping of property belonging to others that the municipality controls?
It will. We're working with the police department on evidentiary procedures, and the nonprofit and the department will have a methodology that meets legal requirements.
Mayor, would you at least take a look at wherever this property is going to be kept, putting a camera in there that does not have a cutoff switch at the door? Because I remember a few years ago, back in '94, we did a study over the police department and the evidence locker. They could simply walk in and shut the camera off. I would like to make sure that if we're responsible for the property of these people, nobody has to wonder if their property was gone because somebody shut the camera off. Want to have it on. Thank you.
Ellie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, since we're talking about the homeless camp, I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for coming forward with an ordinance that's going to deal with the issues that the ACLU had. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As Ms. Gray Jackson is well aware, we have a problem in almost every district sitting at this table, and it's our goal this summer to be very proactive and get some of those problems taken care of.
Go ahead, Cheryl, thanks.
Okay, in terms of some of the other areas where there's increased cost of doing business, That in terms of workers' compensation, when we had our approved budget, we did not have the actuarial report at that time. So we now do, and our workers' compensation and related costs are up $1.8 million. Increased fuel costs. Right now, we're only requesting additional funding for public transportation. That's not to say that other departments aren't also experiencing increased fuel costs, but we're going to see how we can manage the budgets that they have. And if they get into jams towards the end of the year, then we'll have to come back to you and talk about it. But for right now, we're just requesting it for public transportation.
Ms. Osiander has a question about fuel costs.
It's about transit. We got the significant grant, I thought, I heard from the AMATS discussion for public transportation, and there's a bill down in Juneau that I thought would give us some more resources. Are you counting in either one of those?
Through the chair, in terms of the legislation, we're not anticipating passage at this point. We'll have to check, things can happen at the last minute.
All right. And the AMATS document that showed increased funding for transit? It showed about $950,000.
I think it's for buses and not for fuel.
No, it is
Yeah.
for buses, but I just anticipated an amendment or somehow accepting that. It isn't necessary? Because it seemed to be a surprise that it had come.
New
Let's
bus?
check into that.
Yeah,
Let's check
you
into
can
that.
report back
Thank you.
to,
Yeah.
just broadcast the answer to all the assembly if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Trainee to transit?
On fuel cost, I'm concerned about the police department that's constantly with their cars driving everywhere. Have we bought bulk fuel, or is it just wherever the market is at that given time when they get the gas?
Mr. Trainee, that is through purchasing, and if Lucinda's here, she might be able to add to it, but they do have a contract to purchase. I know that Lance Wilbur has been trying to explore if there's ways we can really buy in bulk by partnering up with other purchasers so that we could get an even better price. But
Could you just let the assembly know by memo, because
Sure.
every time I turn around, the gas has gone up. I think it's now $4.11 a gallon, but next week it'll probably be $4.25 a gallon. Thank you, ma'am.
And then APDES, the stormwater compliance, this is the federal mandate, the pollution discharge. This is additional funds to continue with the stormwater data collection and mapping that has to be completed in 2013, as well as $250,000 for cleaning out the storm drains. So this is continuing the work that we started last year.
It doesn't include any additional costs, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it doesn't have any costs associated with the snow dump discussions that we're having, or do you anticipate increased compliance requirements for snow dumps and some of the other ones that are under consideration?
We didn't get an amendment request for that. Do you know anything about it?
Bottom line is NEPDES or now APDES requirements over the next few years are going to be dramatic. In fact, millions of dollars in extra costs for the city. One of the challenges we're going to see in budgets in the future is going to be these NEPDES requirements. They're extreme.
Yeah.
It includes obviously snow dumps, which now have to be lined and filtered and
Yeah. Well, we've got a whole bunch of snow melt going on now, so we'll have costs probably associated with that this year. So maybe we would want to look to see if they have any challenges in that. And then next winter, of course, which is a different budget, but just thanks for the answer.
And then under police, fire, medical trust, this is $539,000 for, you may recall in 2009, the Assembly approved including surviving spouses in the program, as well as providing a subsidy for those who are in the trust who buy municipal insurance. And there was an audit last December that identified that our Fund 603, which is the municipality's health insurance fund, was paying this cost. And so for 2010, you passed a supplemental last December, and this is the request for the 2011 budget so that our health insurance fund is not paying this cost. And then in terms of voter-approved bonds and operations and maintenance costs associated with bonds, $708,000. A biggest chunk of that is $521,000 for the recycled asphalt program. So each year it gets approved in the bonds. We charge it to the bonds, but we need to budget the cost of the positions that do the work. So that's the biggest share of that. and then about $180,000 for public works related projects, O&M. And then on the priority initiative, the mayor's talked about the efficiency RFP that we currently have on the street that's going to look at our operations and maintenance activities, as well as other fleet management services. And so we're requesting $300,000 to pay for that RFP. That will result in greater savings down the line.
What's the window of that? We wouldn't see any efficiency opportunities to apply to this year's service operations or anything like that?
Well,
You anticipate?
The
Mayor?
RFP is,
Go ahead.
the RFP is due, responses are due back to us by next Friday. There's a potential that that may get moved a little bit, so we'll see what the timeframes are for the work to be done. More realistically, it'll be 2012 savings because, well, by the time we implement the recommendations.
Unless they come up with some really good ideas early.
And we did encourage them to come up with early wins.
Yeah.
So to the degree we can, we will.
Correct. Elvie, did you have?
I do, Mr. Chairman,
ahead.
thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there a dollar amount that was out there for the RFP already, other than the 300,000? There wasn't? It was just the press release and no dollar amount?
I don't know.
I
about
thought I saw a
that.
dollar amount. Well, there was a press release from the mayor's office on the RFP, and I thought I saw a dollar amount attached to it, but I guess I was wrong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor, Lucinda,
300,000, or,
I remember seeing another dollar amount, not 300,000.
I will check on that.
Okay, thank you.
go ahead, Cheryl, thanks.
Okay. In terms of updating revenues, these are some of the revenue changes, but overall, revenues are down about 1.9 million from what we were projecting last, really October when we submitted our budget. Primary areas, hotel motel tax, it's increasing 1.1 million, but some of that goes to Fund 202, the Civic Ventures activity, so it's not all to general government. Auto tax down about $60,000. Tobacco tax down about $700,000. And Lucinda, when she spoke with you previously, she touched on some of these. But in this case, the good news is in 2011, we got a bump up in tobacco tax because there was some stockpiling going on before the tax was went into effect on January 1st. But as a result, now our revenues will be down some in 2011. Motor vehicle rental tax up about $71,000. Both that and the hotel motel tax are related to a bump up in projected tourism activities.
I comment there with that, and avgas is approaching $6 a gallon, so you can expect airplane tax to go down as well. I suspect people will just give up.
Gonna park it?
Go ahead. Mr. Crane, you had
Question
a
on
comment.
tobacco tax. What was the year end? I thought we were positive at year end about $1 million.
Correct.
We were.
So we're only down 300,000 when you balance out the end of the year and this.
So sure, if we did 2 years together,
Okay, so we're looking at 300,000 positive.
correct.
Well, this is just.
But we do it year by year,
this year.
Yeah.
I know, but I just want to make sure that we're talking reality, because it concerns me when I see a drop of 700,000 if you don't take into account we're $1 million over at the end of the last year.
The
were buying
The
ahead
real
of time.
test will be the next quarter or two when we see
Yeah.
whether or not it stabilizes again, because it's clear that there was, I think, stockpiling going on at the end of the
I think
year.
they're stockpiling, when they look at the price of gas going to the valley, I think we're going to be fine. Thank you.
Other revenues, Cheryl?
Just the municipality's trust fund contribution up around 100,000. MISA dividends from the utilities down about $800,000. Traffic and court fines down $675, and that's primarily due to the projected permanent fund dividend amount, so there's less to garnish. Investment earnings down. Lucinda did talk with you about that at the work session you previously had. And then fire plan review fees down about $300,000 due to reduced, lower level of construction activity.
Thank you, Dan Moore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one of the other important things you do at this time is, deal with fund balance, and setting aside funding for the necessary reserves to protect our bond rating and and for emergencies. And so this is kind of a walkthrough of where we ended at the end of December, end of 2010. And in total, there was 55.5 million. And so that would include, like Mr. Trainee was talking about, the increased tobacco tax. That would be part of that fund balance at year end. So then, in terms of what we set aside for 2011, in terms of fund balance or reserves, first there's some accounting adjustments that are made by the finance folks. And then we set aside 8.25% for our bond reserve. So that's $27 million. And then we have built in here a 3% operating emergency reserve, which the policy has been between 2 and 3%. So that's almost 9.9 million, as well as a tax settlement reserve, which you've also been briefed on by the CFO. So after doing all those things, then we have about 11.2 million that is described as unreserved. And so our proposal for that unreserved fund balance is to use 3.1 million to pay off the municipal light and power land purchase loan. That was taken out in 2006, approved by the Assembly. At that time, it was 3.7 million. Full payments required in 2011, and the first principal payment on that loan was made last December. And so also the remediation for Reed Boulevard and Kincaid Park remediation. And so our proposal is to pay for those three things. We introduce a standalone Assembly resolution, and so those are handled separately. And so then after we take care of those liabilities, we still have 6.7 million remaining, which our proposal is to use that as tax relief. And the way we do that is by collecting less taxes than otherwise would be required.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. And the first question is, a constituent called me last night and asked me why is general government paying for ML&P's remediation issues? Why isn't ML&P paying? And so that's my first question that I need to respond to my constituent on.
Well, the remediation at Reed Boulevard is not directly associated with ML&P. I mean, this was the Glen Square project, and PCB laden dirt from that project was, mistakenly moved over to Reed Boulevard. So it's not directly a ML&P problem.
Good answer, thank you. And then my second question is, I know, based on this and conversations, that the unreserved fund balance remaining is 11.2. But my question is, at the end of, at year end, what was the dollar amount left over in direct costs for all departments? What was the actual dollar amount left over at year end?
Oh, wasn't it
The actual amount.
15 point something, 15.5?
Okay, so at the end of the year, departments spend $15.5 million less than what was budgeted.
But of course, as you know, some of that was in accounts that are not in general government, police and fire, medical, and other accounts that can't be accessed. Lucinda, do you want to?
But it was 15.5.
Well, if I could, I would like to verify that, because
Okay.
there was a point in time at the end of December 31st, before the audit had really gotten underway,
Right.
and encumbrances and all that finance does.
Right.
And so we can
Right.
establish what, we
Right.
can get back to you
And
on.
Mr. Chairman, I have some more questions on web-based reporting, but I'll wait till later to ask these questions so we can move on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just to clarify, what Ms. Gray Jackson's question was, is this number going to match the CAFR then? Is that where we're headed with the auditors that are right behind this affirmation, what that number was? So
Yes.
Well, on one spreadsheet, excuse me, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, it won't match because in the CAFR, it's going to show all the departments and how much money was left over at the end of the year. So it's going to show that 15.5 million number or whatever it was in one of the documents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
But it'll separate it by fund, so
I
you
understand,
clearly
and that's
see
what
the-
my question was the fund separation, the fund balance separation, and the departmental breakdown. That's very helpful. Mr. Trainee had a question.
Cheryl, on the tax settlement, we put that into an account. What % interest do we get off of that money while we're holding it for resolution? Do you know?
We've actually given it to the court to hold for us so that.
So we're not earning any interest off of it at all?
Well,
No, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
We filed a motion such that if we prevailed, the money would go to the Superior Court. That motion has not yet been ruled on. At this point in time, the 4.6 million is sitting in our cash pool. And it is invested along with our other.
So we
cash
are
pool.
investing it.
Yes.
Now, if we lose, then we have to give them, what, 8% interest?
Well, that would be to be determined, but yes, that's likely the percentage.
Thank you.
I just had a follow-up on the ML&P question earlier with that. Now that it's sitting on basically city land, don't we have a recourse back to the generator of the hazmat that we would want to get a reimbursement there, or what?
Yeah, that's all in litigation, and that would be sorted out by the courts as well. But
Okay.
the one thing we know for sure is EPA has directed us to do these cleanups this year. We don't think there'll be settlement of, who's really at fault in time to collect prior to this.
I understand.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other question on the remediation. Are we not getting some federal money to help us with that? We're not getting any? Just for peacock cleaners, that issue?
Dennis?
Just peacock?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Dennis will
George is
check on
saying,
peacock.
George is saying.
Because I know we're getting money for peacock.
Yeah,
But not for the others? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Keep moving, I guess.
Tax limit calculation, first quarter is also the time in which we calculate it. In your packet, I sort of extracted the bottom half of the tax calculation, but the last page of your packet has the full tax cap calculation. But in terms of the bottom line, compared to 2010, oops, I forgot the headers up here. So the first column that says 262 million is 2010, and then the one on the right, the 277, is the 2011 tax cap. But in terms of the bottom line, the limit on all taxes that we can collect, because the tax cap applies to all taxes, 277.5 million. Then we back out all the non-property taxes, and so we get down to what's the limit on property taxes that can be collected, line 45. So after we've backed out all the other taxes, the limit on property taxes is the 232 million. And then what are the property taxes required to support the spending as we proposed? That's 225.6 million. And so that means that under the mayor's proposal, we're about 6.5 million below the tax cap. And these numbers do not include the service areas, which set their own mill rates, and they're outside of the cap.
I just had a question. Where's the number of the dollar amount of taxes that we collected last year's budget?
If you go to the last page of your packet, if you go down to line 47, let's see, yes, line 47, you'll see under 2010 is property tax charter limit to be collected. You'll see the 221.4 million.
Yeah, it's actually on line,
Last page, yeah.
line 50 of my page.
Oh,
So that's the 221 is the total dollars collected, and then we're proposing a $4.3 million increase over collections, so.
yes. So, and that takes us to the next slide.
Thank you, I didn't mean to jump ahead.
That's okay, but here we have a summary of that. But slightly different because we include the service areas taxes in this calculation here also. But in terms of the impact on property taxpayers, comparing 2010 to 2011 and including the school district, the total taxes to be collected in 2010 was 471 million. Under our 2011 proposed budgets for both entities, 478.8, for an total increase of 7.6 or 1.6%. And then in terms of mill levies, bottom line, it's an increase of 0.25 mills, and which translates into $25 of an increase annually per $100,000 of assessed value for both the school district and the municipality.
And obviously to calculate that, then the assessor's office has closed down the overall assessed value of the properties in the municipality.
Correct, and that's another good point, because in the fall, we used a preliminary assessed valuation, and now we have the final assessed valuation. And overall, assessments are down about 1% in terms of the total assessed valuation of the municipality. Okay, and then finally, for the mayor's office, and I suspect sometimes you too, also get requests for people who would like to contribute additional dollars to favorite programs that they might have. And so we're providing that opportunity with a new website. It's not in your packet, but you can reach it through the mayor's office, the MOA's homepage. And it's an opportunity to donate to the areas listed here. Those are the ones that we've primarily heard about. So you can even use PayPal to do that. So it's an opportunity.
It's our version of Click and Give, and we're trying to come up with a clever name, so if your creative minds there have something that we could apply to this, we'd welcome it.
Ms. Johnson has a question about that, or comment.
You just answered my question if you're using PayPal, so you will take a discount because of PayPal. I think it's what, 2% or 3%? But it will be easier.
Ms. Drummond?
Would that be tax deductible if it's sort of attempting to increase your property taxes voluntarily?
According to the CFO, yes.
Interesting, okay. That-
Mr.
I was
Honan, to
just
the
adding-
topic of
I think
click
it is on the
and
actual.
do something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did too. I wanted to go backwards if I don't mind.
Then I'll wait.
Yeah, Ms. Drummond's answer wasn't complete.
Yes, the webpage will identify the tax ID number that you can use for your tax return to enable it to be a tax-free.
Great, thank you.
The revenue summary forecast is more of a general question as it relates to the building community and the buildings that we have now. You've not suggested an adjustment one way or the other for either new assessed value, future assessments, or increased building of new buildings. I don't see any adjustment saying that we're sort of on an upward trend, and we've seen since December that we're going to see an additional assessed value come into the system, as well as you don't readjust the revenue downwards or upwards on the building community. Can you tell me where you're at with that?
Well, the Treasury Department scrubbed those numbers during the fall, and that's what we used then. The reason we have plan review for fire department in here, we have a reduction there, is that was an oversight. We should have acknowledged that last fall. So that's why we're adjusting the revenues now. And it's similar to the adjustments that were made last fall. But we can get you Treasury's analysis on which it was based, and we scrubbed the numbers.
Please, because what happened was the fourth quarter summary report showed a fairly significant area where we didn't forecast revenues appropriately. They were down by 150 or 180 or 200,000 reduction in revenues, and yet we still didn't revisit that for this year. So if we have a downward trend, I would want to make sure we don't overstate revenues from that. And 181 adjustment is my next question. There isn't a recoup or a continuation of dollars going back into 181 in this adjustment, or is there?
As our package now stands, there's not an additional contribution to Fund 181. You did provide a deposit last December when you approved a resolution that put about, what was it, 300,000? 310,000 into the fund. But right now, no, we do not have another.
Well, more of an elaborate discussion, but we seem to be forecast. The answer I heard last time was that the revenue generated out of the building permitting and plan review department wasn't keeping pace with the cost of the department. So, my question, and we can answer offline, is it prudent to not make an adjustment if we know we're heading down to a deficit spending situation? Should we not look at that?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and the chairman and I have had this conversation about actually having a meeting and a work session about the building safety fund, and is it structurally broken? I mean, if we're going to go down this path year after year, maybe we should look at how that thing is funded and maybe look at a new methodology, because it doesn't make sense to keep doing the same thing that's not going to be self-supporting.
Well, and no debate here, but my attitude is, of course, we have a first quarter budget adjustment process because we have to mail out the tax bills and collect that revenue, but the reassembly is not prohibited from having a second, third, fourth quarter adjustment process as well. So as we can have those work sessions, I appropriate to not go into deficit spending on that department.
We agree.
I don't know who was next.
But I think
I'm out here at your website, Good website for gift to Anchorage.
Okay.
Question is, we don't have a block in here for like Parks and Rec for Eagle River Chugach. And since they have a separate facility, you guys need to modify it. Is that right, Debbie?
Sure.
So we can take care of Eagle River, please?
We will do that.
Thank you.
And
That's it.
Chugach Volunteer Fire Department would be another good one to put on there if we're picked.
And
Mr. Horn?
Girdwood Volunteer Fire Department. And Girdwood Park.
She's taking notes.
Anybody else?
Maybe under department or program, you could add in what part? Eagle River Chugach.
Or Girdwood.
We can listen.
Oh, yeah.
Good idea, Mr. Mayor.
Assembly Relief Fund.
That was discussed.
Good idea, Mr. Mayor. We're going to go back off this slide to more financial questions.
On slide 6, under liabilities under the payoff MLP land purchase loan, does anybody know the status that maybe Mr. Burst just recently went down to June, I believe, or getting down? I know that there's some concerns over the capital budget now, but there was a request from Northeast Community Council for state funding to help offset that. Is that what would happen if the state were to, if that were to come through and meet, I guess, pass the red line? What would we do with that $3 million?
We would accept the grant and then not use our money for it.
And it would go to fund balance?
Yes.
And right now, we're not counting on anything from the legislature. As you might know, it's very contentious down there. And in fact, the governor has threatened to veto the entire capital budget if his oil tax bill isn't passed. So right now, in our planning, we're assuming no capital budget. And hopefully we'll be pleasantly surprised, which I think we will be.
They have to be recalled.
I'm going to talk process just for a minute and then close down a little bit early. Again, though, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I have some questions and on web-based reporting. If it's appropriate, I ask them now.
Web-based reporting as it relates to
It's budget.
first quarter budget
As it
adjustments.
relates to the budget, I have a question that
Okay, go
I'd
ahead.
like some answers to. Okay, PeopleSoft web-based reporting, which I keep track of, I look at it often, okay? And one of the things that I don't understand is, for example, let me see, January 31st, I pulled the report, and it shows direct costs, and everything's lined up. And then I pull a report on February 25th, and I see that it's showing direct costs as a negative, for starters. And I see that the debt service fund has a budget of, let me see, $37 million, and then debt service has been distributed through departments. It just, I don't understand what's going on here, and I would really like an explanation.
You can either do it on the record or is there an
I
IGC?
don't care how it's done, but I
IGC.
really would like
Let's just, you and I
an
have a
explanation.
meeting, and if anybody else is
That would be great.
interested,
That would be really great, yeah. And
Mostly because
Thank
the
you,
rest of
Mr.
us
Chairman.
don't have that.
That's,
Thanks
yeah.
for bringing that to our
You're welcome.
attention, Ellie. Did you want to say something? I thought you were raising your hand. Thank you. Pretty clear
thank you.
information. I'm not going to stop the work session just right yet. I want to revisit the process questions that we have on that. The amendment forms are basically just a generic fill in the blank sort of thing. If you can get them to the clerk's office, then that would be very helpful. It isn't my intention, unless you guys have a need to get together as either body of the whole or as a smaller assembly committee. I don't want to judge them prior to the meeting on the 26th. However, there's always that discussion of making sure we don't have competing applications. There's not two of us, so I'll take the liberty of hey, you requested for parks and you requested for parks, maybe you should call Chris Burge. There's always that discussion that has to take place, and unless you guys say otherwise, I'll probably take on some of that role advising my committee of that. So I would like to get that information or the tone of where you're headed with budget adjustments through, maybe by close of business Wednesday of next week, and then where you would want to identify your funding sources and any other additional revenues that you may want to generate. Please include the administration ahead of time, or I will. If you don't put a funding source, I'll ask for the administration's advice on that. I think it's appropriate to, if you want to have more money generated to your budget, you also help figure out where it comes from, and that's the deal. So have completed forms accept them, but they don't count until you fill out all the homework. Any problems with the process? Because that's important to me that we get fair hearing on all of that without judgments prior to the debate on the 26th.
One question.
Go ahead.
Reference the library. There's been a few assembly members who have talked about adding back Diamond Sampson Library. I'm concerned that the books may have been given away already from that library. Because I understand in May 7th and 8th, the LUSAC's giving away books. Now, are the library books gone so the assembly could not restore that library? Is that reality, or where are we at with that process?
They have been distributed to other libraries in our system.
Okay, but none of the books that the LUSAC's giving away in the 7th, 8th are books from the Diamond Sampson Library?
They may be. There's books from throughout the system that they consider to be outdated or surplus to their needs, and so those could come from any branch.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to know because I've heard some assembly members want to restore that library. If the books are gone, it doesn't make much sense. Thank you.
On that subject, I just, if anybody is interested in working on that, I just want you to know that I've spent quite a bit of time with Friends of Library and with the foundation, and we are working on a program for South Anchorage. We don't have, we don't know what we're going to need yet for funding. I'm working with the director, with Karen, as far as she's coming up with the scope of our project and the cost of our project. We're also looking at partnerships, public-private partnerships, and Chris and I have been out, beating the flames on that one. So if you are interested in putting something back in the budget, I'd really appreciate some discussion with you so you can know where the Library Association and South Anchorage, where we are on that.
Thank you. Board repeal process question?
Sure.
I don't know if enough to, at this point, know if an amendment is needed. So there's general areas where I'd like more information. One of them specifically is the federal funding for transit, because I really believe there was a significant increase there. So that kind of general question, I hope you can circulate answers to the whole body prior to the date that we need to get the amendment into bill. And
if I could, Mr. Stark, and part of the schizoid nature of our budget is that sometimes grants are included in the direct cost numbers, and sometimes they are not.
yeah, I may have misunderstood.
So that we can still receive the money and deploy it, but we'll find out. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I should have asked this question earlier. What was the cause of the workers' comp increase of 1.8 million?
Higher claims.
Okay, is
We
there
had
a
some
way?
expensive claims.
Is there a way to avoid? Is there a way to avoid that?
Well, we have a new safety officer who's now in risk management, who has an aggressive plan. Is that how you would fairly describe it, George?
Extremely aggressive.
Extremely
All right.
aggressive and a lot of focus about reducing workers' comp claims.
Was there a safety officer missing?
He departed, 3/4 through the year, and so this individual is from Solid Waste Services, who has assumed that role. And
Now that Solid Waste Services has fewer workers' comp claims because of the automation. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, we're going to close 10 minutes early. Have a nice weekend. Thank you.